These two guys are AI agent experts from Microsoft. In this podcast, we talk about how to automate real tasks with AI agents, what impact reasoning models like O1 will have, and they even revealed what AI agents they use at work. This is the David Ondrej podcast. Enjoy. How would you describe Windows Agent Arena to the average person who knows about ChatGPT, Claude, but not too much about benchmarks?
So a lot of these current chat applications, these LLM-driven applications, are in some sense very static. You kind of give the LLM or the model or the chatbot a question, the LLM responds, and then you can continue to engage it. But it's very much so dependent on you continuing to prompt the LLM. Yeah. When we're looking at agents, you want LLMs to act somewhat autonomously. So the idea is that you give the agent a task. The agent is to basically interpret that task and carry on autonomously by its own with minimal or almost no future instructions to finish that task on, let's say, your computing environment. So Windows Agent Arena is a benchmark that tries to test how well these LLMs and more importantly, these multimodal models do as agents on real-world tasks in computing environments.
There are many agents today out there. We are referring as this agent as desktop or PC controlling agents, meaning that they have access to the full array of applications that are commonly installed on a Windows operating system. It's easy to say that an AI agent is performing well, but you cannot improve what you cannot measure. And so you need kind of like an established environment where you can throw in AI agents and actually test it through a real task that user like most commonly like find on a Windows operating system or many other operating system.
And personally, what excites me the most is that this benchmark is practical, right? Because most benchmarks that people know, like MMLU and the other ones, they're mostly memorization, right? So more training data will usually result in better scores. But the average person, they don't care about that stuff, right? They care about what can the AI do for me. For me, I think the magic will be once the AI models can work with apps that are not like pre-programmed or not super famous. So let's say like an app that only has tens of thousands of users. How far do you think we are from those type of agents?
If you take a look at performance numbers on many benchmarks, right? As you said, MMLU, Big Bench, etc. Like those are very specific in what they try to measure. Agents need to operate independently. They need to reason. They need to plan. They need to execute. There are some new agentic benchmarks that are getting out there as well now. For instance, there's been like Mind-to-Web, Web Arena, Visual Web Arena. In other cases, there have been things like UFO, or there have been other benchmarks like OS World, Android World.
That's why we thought a lot about this challenge, and we came up with what we think is kind of like a good middle ground.
Right, so can we jump into the demo?
Yeah, let's do that.
I've decided that I'm going to build my own AI agent startup. And what's more, I'm going to be documenting every single step inside of the new society. I'm going to reveal everything I do, from choosing the idea to building the agent to getting my first customer. So if you want to build an AI agent startup and scale it to $10,000 a month, make sure to join the new society. Inside, we will help you every step of the way. And if you don't like it, I'll personally give you the money back. So make sure to join now. It's the first link in the description.
So these are, we call these trajectories, and these are some steps that an AI agent, that a PC controlling AI agent is performing inside the Windows Agent Arena. For this task specifically, we are talking about installing the Pylons extension in VS Code. And we can look at the task at the AI agents performing all the steps that are needed for executing this task. Some other tasks include like enable the do not track feature in Edge to enhance my online privacy.
So in between each one of these shifts and these screenshots, what's happening is that the agent has an initial plan from the task that's given by some human user. The agent needs to basically look at the original task, come up with a plan as to how to accomplish that task, come up with the first set of actions that it wants to input into the operating or computing environment, and then it makes those actions. Those actions get actually operated or implemented on the VM, and then the VM sends back a screenshot along with the state of the information that our multimodal agent then uses to plan the next step. And then it'll keep going this way until it decides whether or not the task is accomplished or not, or whether or not the task is infeasible. Sometimes the agent plans out things correctly and the plan and reasoning is right, but sometimes there are some artifacts that happen. So for instance, in this case, to change my Edge profile name to Thomas, it actually does the right action. But in this case, what happens is that it forgets to delete the original profile name before putting Thomas in, right?
Can you guys reveal like what is the agent built from? Like what LLM are you using? What framework? I assume probably AutoGen, right?
So for our LLMs, actually, we took a bit of a different approach. AutoGen certainly has its strengths, but also has its weaknesses. As you probably see from many different applications, products, software, the more easy it is for you to customize something, the more accessible it is, the more difficult it is for you to tinker with the very fine details that you need to tinker at the end, right? There's this trade-off between accessibility and customizability. So we started from scratch, right? We didn't really use AutoGen. We basically had the following in mind. So the agent needs to be able to do three things. It needs to be able to reason, it needs to be able to plan, and then it needs to be able to act or execute. So we have an internal proprietary perception model that basically is able to caption images. It's also able to take in an accessibility tree or UI tree, basically describing in text form like where icons are placed within a program or application. It takes that and returns an image with bounding boxes or a set of marks, which is basically the icons that they recognize along with ID numbers along with those icons. And those are fed as textual information to our planner agent, and then our planner agent then uses that to decide what to do with each step. The human performance rate on this benchmark, success rate wise, is about 74%. So any kind of improvement or towards benchmarking or introducing agents, like our first introduction of our agent Navi, is kind of like an appreciable move forward. Any improvement in some sense.
And is that like random people? You mentioned 74%. Is that random people or people as your team? What type of people?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this is someone who's a casual user of the Windows operating system.
Okay.
Right? And so you can see even for a casual Windows user, it's still a very high percentage. And maybe that speaks to how appreciable or how accessible the Windows operating system might be.
So what percentage do you think the agents need to reach for them to be mainstream adopted? Because, I imagine putting myself in the eyes of a, Fortune 500 CEO, it's like a big risk to outsource some important task to an AI agent, right? So do you think it needs to be like 80%, 90 or 98? What do you think?
It's been the case where you see some companies out there that are focusing specifically on one domain or another, right? So there are many companies out there, startups, for instance, that focus on developing a similar autonomous agent, but only within your browser, right? So it operates as like a browser plugin for Chrome or Chromium browsers. The complication with what we're trying to go for, which is to do something on your entire computer, right? This is not just the web. In terms of what's successful enough to deploy or productionalize, right? I think obviously right now the rates are too low. I don't know what number is required, but I know one bare minimum requirement is that there's a safe and robust way for humans to intervene and work with these agents.
I also think that for the OS, like the operating systems, it will be huge. Like right now, people are deciding, for example, with phones, right? Less and less about the hardware because it's like really good everywhere, and more about the software. Like if one of the operating systems, like let's say if Windows really nails this, I think it will start seeing even though it's like already probably the most popular for consumer tech, it will start seeing even more adoption because like let's say it can save you like a few hours a week, right? Because it says like built-in agents, I think people will really start to value that, and they'll be willing to pay a premium for devices that come with these operating systems that have pre-built agents and like AI automations.
Yep, I think as long as those robust or ways that we can responsibly encourage the usage of these agents are in place, then yeah, for sure. Francesco, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or.
Yeah, we're talking also like about applications that might possibly require swiping or like really like very complex user interface interaction. And I feel that we still have quite some time to take all those specific scenarios. Like if you're looking at an application like, I don't know, Adobe or like any canvas where you actually go and draw something, we are still like quite far. Our focus was mostly like on simple UI interactions that can be represented as click, typing, scrolling, and really anything that can be done today easily with UI automation framework like, I don't know, Playwright or PyWin Auto, or like Windows UI automation framework. These are the common actions where we are actually focusing on.
So what do you see like the near-term future of work like? Because I think there's like two extremes, people who think, AI isn't that useful, and then there's people who think like AI will replace everything. Like personally, what I think is that, as you mentioned, there will be a lot of humans in the loop with AI agents because currently LLMs excel at certain things and humans excel at others, right? Like creativity and reasoning, that's what humans are better at. Memorization, that's what LLMs are better at. So do you guys have like a specific vision of, let's say, if we were to do this again in 2-3 years, how would our like work day look like?
I think that there are several cases to consider. One is obviously dependent on skill level. So for an individual who's coming in who doesn't know how to do much, right, these LLMs might be of great assistance. We've seen something similar where Copilot comes in, for instance, from the GitHub side, and helps beginner coders improve productivity by quite a bit, but maybe not as much as for more senior developers or more senior coders. The other thing might simply be a matter of preference, right? So, for instance, some individuals, like myself, I admit I was a bit of a holdout on using LLMs until just very recently, despite me being a researcher in this field, which is probably a little ironic. And so once I started using LLMs, I started thinking, okay, so they're not immediately useful to me this way, but as I engaged and played with them a little more, I started realizing the ways that I can use them specifically in my own workflow that's more productive. And obviously, the third case is a matter of security and privacy, right? Depending on the sector or industry you're in, depending on the line of work you're in, there are certain barriers that are in place or certain guards that are in place that prevent you from interfacing with this company or with these sort of applications altogether, because they may use that data as training data, you may leak information, sensitive information outside, so on and so forth. So with all those three things in mind, I think going on in the future, there's probably going to be much more work, and I hope there's much more work on customizability and preference tuning in some sense, where you can load an LLM or load a foundation model. It can, in some sense, automatically detect your preferences or detect your skill level. And then in that way, you'll be able to work with your own customized model without having to fine tune a model for every single person or every single skill level.
Going back to the main problem about like complex application, how you're gonna go and navigate the array of those. There are two ways that goes top of my mind. Like you can either like have this ongoing conversation with the LLM and the LLM getting back to you, asking clarifying questions about what's your ultimate objective, or are you actually gonna confirm this operation on behalf of the user. Like you definitely need this back and forth with the LLM just to get that privacy concern a little bit like more relaxed. And secondly, what Dan said is that ultimately you will need like specialized LLM agents that will go and specialize on the actual application that you're working on. Like going back to the same Adobe example, most likely it's a huge application with so many inner menus that you might need to navigate, so many options. So you definitely need to have that information somewhere, because there's so many information, so many icons. Even like a vision model will struggle to get a sense of what's going on the screen on behalf of the user. So you definitely need some to give some help to the LLM in that regard.
Like for the average user, do you think the future is more in pre-built agents that are like come in packaged, maybe as a SaaS or part of the OS, or in every person building and designing their own agent for their specific needs? Like, will it be the same as like apps on an app store where 99% of people never build their own app?
Enterprise kind of pre-packages an agent for you, right? And this could be similar, for instance, to what happens with Copilot on Copilot PCs as an example. In those cases, the prepackaged agent comes as a sort of tabula rasa or a blank slate, right? And then somehow over time, obviously with the appropriate privacy and data sort of considerations in place, so that you can control what the agent learns from your data and your material, the agent then learns about your preferences and things over time. And so from that sort of blank slate enterprise agent, it kind of learns slowly, surely about what you want to do and adapts to you that way. So that's what I think more likely than not will happen, just simply from an economics point of view. In terms of open sourcing personal development, I would love it. And this is sort of why we put Windows Agent Arena benchmark forward. If people could just play with their own agents and develop like a chatbot that's like a second version of you, for example, and then just have it send off and just do things your way, and not just accomplishing the task successfully, but accomplishing them your way, right? So for instance, when I change certain settings on my browser, when I change certain default settings for my word processor, that's going to be very different depending on the person who uses these things. And so not only accomplishing those tasks, but also being able to program those agents to accomplish things my way with those preferences in mind. That's something I also hope continues to push us forward as well, having that balance in place.
Yeah, and another reason like why we put the whole thing open source is that definitely we need like more contribution in the area of like task. Right now we have like about 150 tasks that we think like commonly represent the user journey across like a Windows operating system. But again, like we might be biased by what we think. So definitely like we are like open for a conversation there. And then where it comes like also like bring your own agent. That's something that we want like user to just like go and throw their agents into our platform just to understand what's the actual use case for their AI agents. So yeah, like definitely open for a conversation there.
You touched on open source. Where do you guys like stand on not just in agents, like in general in the AI open source debate? Do you think the future will look, mostly open source with some closed source models, or will it be mostly the closed source models outcompeting like all the open source development?
So personally, I feel like it's going to be something resembling what we've seen in the research of adversarial robustness. So, and just as a summary, like as a field in adversarial robustness, you may already know this, David, like people develop attacks on neural network models or other deep learning models to sabotage them, misalign them, etc. And then someone else comes up with a defense for that attack, right? Then someone else develops another attack that gets around that defense, and so on and so forth, like going on and on. So I think that this sort of presence, this dual existence between open source and closed source, this will continue on, and the competition between them will drive further innovation and benefits for all of us, right? Right now, we see a lot of open source models that are delivering very impressive performance, like Llama 3.1, against sort of the closed source models that the competitors started by companies like OpenAI and Prebuilt, et cetera. A lot of these things, I think, is just having the presence of both and that competition being essential. So no one can be sort of better than the other, but so long as we maintain this kind of, in some sense, delicate status quo or equilibrium, that will drive innovations and benefits from both sides. That will be beneficial for all of us, I think.
Another point is that when we started like thinking about the whole core idea about Windows Agent Arena, it was like about 6-7 months ago, and like the open source scene when it comes to LLM wasn't as flourished as it is right now. So when it comes, if we are looking at these improvements like being done daily, like with Llama 3.1, for instance, or like even like smaller vision models that are popping up right now, it makes sense, and it gives us like an opportunity for these like I think smaller player, but they're not that small, to come and like play a huge role in the desktop or interface agent.
Okay, let's talk like real specific. What AI agents do you guys use in your day-to-day?
So I have to say I'm a developer on my side, so I have to say GitHub Copilot. That's mostly like my day-to-day job is regarding writing code, designing UI, developing in general, and it makes sense for me to use like GitHub Copilot. I use a lot of ChatGPT myself. Was impressed by the latest reasoning capabilities myself as well. So I have to say that we are also looking forward for the latest benchmark results coming for O1. That's another like huge point.
Yeah, I think GitHub Copilot, I use it from time to time, not as much as I would want, but sometimes just so I kind of test and see what's going on, see if we're giving new developments or new function capabilities. As a researcher, I also try to use GPU and Anthropic's Cloud, and just to see like how different the new versions are. Like what does the GPT, for instance, the new O1 model look like compared to Sonnet 2.5, and seeing like, hey, does one deliver better for certain categories or things? Like sometimes I use it as like a talking buddy for research ideas when I don't have other fellows and peers around me. I ask these questions to different models and ask them as like agents how they would carry out experiments, how they would argue against my idea, the pros and the cons. And so those two things are things that I tend to use and try to play with and speak with too.
You've both mentioned O1. How do you think that will impact the future of AI agents, these advanced reasoning models that can think for seconds, if not minutes?
I think it gives an opportunity, honestly, because like if you really like want to take like some complex task, you need to do like some additional grounding or like searching of what's the ultimate objective of the user. You just don't want to spit out like the first thing that an LLM thinks. So like reasoning, we think that that's gonna be like one of the way to tackle like these particular problems. There are though like scenarios where it makes sense for smaller prompts, like simpler queries, just to use like one of the less capable models, like as you mentioned, like the smaller variant of Claude or like GPT-4 Mini. Like I think that every model like find its own place in the whole ecosystem right now.
Yeah, I think O1 is interesting in that at least the reported way or supposed way that they've sort of trained this model through RLHF on both the chain of thought tokens as well as other stuff being fed into the reward function. It's interesting because two things pop into my mind. One is that from a scaling perspective, right, they kind of changed the dynamics of the scaling laws that we thought we knew somewhat about when it comes to scaling up the training large language models, right? If inference is going to be such an important factor in these cases, I'm wondering how that plays into how scaling up the size and resources of the model translates to performance now. Now we see that additional inference can also be helped to improve performance in many cases too. So that's, I think, the first thing. The second thing is that the one thing I've noticed with O1 is that it's interesting because back in the day, if you were interacting with simpler LLMs, when I say simpler, I just mean like a year or two ago, it's kind of like a testament to how fast this field moves, right? In these cases, it's like, well, if I ask a underspecified question, right, I kind of get an answer that kind of satisfies a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then I get an opportunity after just a quick reply to basically, clarify and reiterate with the LLM, right? In these multi-turn conversations in this paradigm we're all used to. With O1, the issue is that because it takes so much additional compute to do inference and it kind of hides this thing from you, it takes much longer for you to get sometimes to the root question you want, right? You might ask an underspecified question, it delves super deep through chain of thought and through additional inference. And then you might realize, oh, this was an entirely underspecified question. So in some sense, you're kind of wasting inference. In some sense, you're kind of taking that opportunity cost of time, delving into an underspecified question, whereas the trade-off before was, let me just quickly reiterate and quickly respecify myself, right? And that obviously has implications for energy, efficiency, and all sorts of other things when it comes down to it. So it might give a chance for other places that focus more on inference compute for chip design or other things an opportunity too, but that's something that's less clear.
So I think the obvious solution in theory, obviously in making it happen will be hard, but will be like AI agents that can analyze the question, decide if it's something easy, like, if somebody asks like what is the capital of a certain country, you don't need to do any reasoning there. Or if it's something like advanced, if somebody describes a task they want accomplished, the agent will do a bunch of research how to use the tools mentioned on the web, what's the latest documentation, what is the user like, what type of work he does. So I think like that will probably be the key, where the question gets analyzed and then the agent decides how long to think or how much inference to dedicate to this problem before it actually commits it.
Yeah, absolutely. At least that's what I personally think, right? And that's why I kind of made such a big deal about learning the preferences or learning the skill level of the individual is interacting with at the beginning, because I think that's probably going to be a way to navigate this trade-off that I was describing a little better. Yeah.
Yes, and when it comes to actually solving like interface or desktop AI agents problems, like there might be also be a shortcut for the AI agents to take, like thinking about like opening a specific application or like even like drawing on a canvas. It might be possible that there is an API doing that already in the Windows operating system, and the LLM might be smart enough just to take that specific shortcut, or it will go and perform the same kind of actions like through a set of click and scroll events. So it's really like giving again like a chance to the LLM to find the shortest path to the goal, and that will also like solve some of like the common like inference and capacity problems at this stage.
With inference being so expensive, do you guys think there will be a period where only certain people or certain companies can afford to run the cutting edge models? Or like, maybe they will only, like maybe the average person can only afford to run it like once a week, but if somebody has the budget, they can run it all the time. Do you think like that could happen?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing some of this gulf divide happen already, right? Between, let's say, academia and industry labs, for example, right? Or even worse, like when I first started off playing around with LLMs, I was dirt poor. Like I hadn't a single hour sent of GPU to my name, right? And so many times I would have to rely on API calls or Google Colab's generosity when it's free T4s, for example. In these cases, I think that we already see this divide happen when it comes to compute for training, right? For GPU compute when it comes to training.
Yeah, I'd say that the whole capacity problem, like sometimes makes things hard for everyone at this stage, I'd say. I wouldn't exclude like even like running like smaller local models for simpler tasks, honestly, at this stage. We know that CPU inference is becoming more and more and more simpler and faster to what it was like. If you had to ask me like 1 year ago, go and run your own Llama model on your like local setup, I would say you're crazy. And now like look at us, like 1 year later, we are here. And we are even able like to run to some degree like some function calling using like a local models. which makes things honestly like very hopeful for the whole like desktop AI agents ecosystem.
Yeah, I like when I'm on a plane and I know that I'm probably the only one with, Llama 3.1, 70 billion installed. It's like really, really good feeling having that extra help. And I can only imagine where in 12 months or 24 months, the models, maybe, I mean, obviously it will be from laptop to our phones, right? Apple and other companies are already putting neural engines into the phones. So it's only a matter of time before the, 1 billion, 2 billion models get good enough so that it's generated locally on our phone. So I think people are probably underestimating not just like the cutting edge of the biggest models, but also the kind of 1 to 3 billion size. I think that's going to be really important, especially for people with worse computers or people with like cutting edge phones. Okay, how do you guys think we as people will interact with AI agents? Will it be through chat? Will it be through voice? Or will it be the AI agents kind of being promptless and reminding us of what to do, or like notifications, or you need to do this or you wanted to do that? What do you think is the ideal like medium?
It very much depends, right? I think the first thing that pops in my head is accessibility, right? So for people who are impaired in one, let's say, in sense or another, right? One modality might be more important. So for instance, for people who are vision impaired, audio might be the best modality, and then that's why we have these things. And even our website for our blog post of Windows Agent Arena, like there's an option for audio impaired people or visual impaired people. It describes like the text and the captions for the images all out there as well.
I feel like that will depend a lot by the discipline like one is in. Like honestly, as a software engineer myself, I'd say I might have used like voice modality twice, thrice maybe, because like I'm an introvert person. So definitely when I'm trying to get myself down to a task, I just want to run undisturbed, like type some prompt and expect like a result back. So I don't want like any additional distractions. But then there are like other scenarios like the one that Dan mentioned, like accessibility. That's a huge one that we are seeing how this AI agent can go and look at a screenshot, for instance, and suggest like actionable item that you can take out of that specific screenshot that the user is seeing. That's something that's mind blowing, honestly. And we foresee like AI agents in this space might play definitely a bigger role, and we see that from many startups that are being created as we speak.
It also feels like the different modalities have like completely different feeling. At least for me, like when I use voice, it's very different experience than when I use ChatGPT as a chatbot. So I think maybe we'll be using it for different things. Like for example, a few days ago, I had like an ant invasion in my flat. So I just turned on, advanced voice mode on ChatGPT, and it kind of guided me what to do. I think text would be like very impractical, having to come back to my laptop or my phone, like describe what is happening. So I just had it in my, AirPods, and it was telling me, like walking me through the steps. So I think, another example is, for example, cooking. Like, let's say you're cooking something, probably checking you have a greasy hands, checking your laptop is not the ideal. So I think there will be different use cases for different modalities. Also, when, the AI glasses really become available, I think it will be huge just having the permanently like Llama or whatever LLM running in your ear, obviously listening to what you say and then seeing what you hear. I think seeing what you see, like I think all the modalities will be useful. And like right now people only see text. Right now we're starting to see a little bit of voice, but I think this is going to be like another one of those things that will unlock mainstream adoption, because currently still, even ChatGPT, let's say like 200 million monthly active users, that's nothing compared to how many people are on the internet. So I think AI agents are probably the thing that will unlock it. Whether obviously I'm not sure about which modality it will be, but I'm pretty sure that once we see like one AI agent that does a certain task that's mainstreamly recognized as being useful, and like it kind of gives the people a wake-up shock of like, oh wow, this is really here, the AI thing is really useful. I think that'll be the step that will really unlock going from hundreds of millions of users to billions of users.
We also saw, I think, like recently that wow moment when it comes like to audio podcast generated, AI generated. That was like honestly another mind-blowing job. So there are different like fashion of modalities that can go and tackle like this very even niche task as the one about creating a podcast. But for instance, for Windows Agent Arena, we ended up like having our own AI generated podcast in 5 minutes without having to go through the same effort as, and we got it for free, honestly, which is again mind blowing.
Yeah, I think it's the reason why multimodality is so important, right? I think that it's the main reason why we're moving beyond LLMs, right? Like a lot of companies are now introducing, for instance, vision modality into their LLMs, right? OpenAI, Gemini, for example. And a lot of these cases, it makes sense because you want to use all multiple modalities at once. Like in many cases, different modalities carry information other modalities lack, right? With audio or voice, maybe Alexa or whoever can determine the sarcasm of my voice, for example, right? Or like for cooking, as you mentioned, when you show me one static image of like, here's a plate of vegetables and here's a plate of the finished dish, I kind of want to know how'd you go from that state to the other state. I have no idea what happened in between, right? It's like you snap your fingers and magically it's there. So that video modality acts as an instruction to tell you over time, right, those spatial and temporal dynamics, what happens there.
Isn't like the ultimate modality for AI agents recording the human input and learning from that? Like, imagine if there's millions of people performing the same task, like one of the tasks you guys showed, right? Let's say draw a circle in Microsoft Paint or change some settings in Edge. Surely if you had millions of different people on different computers with different skill levels performing that task, and somehow, I guess that's the difficult part, turning that into some structured data or something that could be trained on. That probably will be better than just text and parsing screenshots into text. What do you think? Like, will that look like?
Yeah, so it's funny enough, it's something that I don't think just us, but many folks are working on, right? Collecting tons and tons of trajectory data from human demonstrations, which are probably considered the ground truth of correct tasks, right? Or correct ways to do tasks. The problem is that we're kind of still aping or imitating what humans actually do, right? We think vision is important, so we include vision modalities. We think text is important, we include text grounding, text understanding. But to think about how complex a human person actually is, right? Like the number of muscle fibers that need to work for you to move your hand to your mouse to draw a circle, right? Or the senses that we're even unaware of that are in our ears to help us balance ourselves when we move, right? How we move our eyes, like even the modalities we think we understand, like vision, may not truly even be reflective of what's actually happening with our corneas and our eyes in terms of how we process vision, right? So in some sense, we're still very cheaply imitating these modalities for the ones we do understand, and in some sense are still unaware of the other modalities we rely on so naturally and implicitly, but just don't know how to recreate in this sort of ML, deep learning, connectionist point of view at this point. So I think trying to understand that a little better will help. Otherwise, what we risk doing is that we collect all this trajectory data. Sure, we'll get a lot of ground truth demonstrations, but we might be overfitting on some latent hidden factor that makes it so that the agents still fail because it's missing that what we call common sense or natural thing that we rely on, but it's just hard for us to articulate, basically.
Any thoughts there, Francesco?
Yeah, what Dan says, and definitely like we should move away from the perspective of PC, because how we've been doing things so far is being like taking screenshot of like what the user is seeing and then like wrapping it up like through an API call that contains additional grounding data for the task that the user is trying to accomplish. So definitely we need to move away from that. But again, the challenge becomes how we're going to go and collect that information. Even me speaking right now, I'm using hand gestures. How we're going to go and get that funnel into an LLM, that's going to be like another challenge. Even like we saw that with the latest voice mode, I think small pauses in the conversation, those mean something for an LLM. Even you're like overthinking something or you're like second guessing what you're trying to do, definitely like you need a way to instruct the LLM that it doesn't have to go to that roof anymore, and you just have to take it back and do something else in return.
Yeah, there's a lot of context that's lost in just text, right? And also one thing that comes into play is that people don't realize how much context we have, right? So from the moment we're born, we're being like trained permanently, right? And people don't think about it, but in some way, like babies are extremely productive because they're like learning so much, they're taking so much input, visual, audio, sensory. It's kind of crazy how much we we have in our brains, and then people expect an LLM or AI agent to know what they mean when there is like so much hidden stuff that's, you know, in the unconscious that people cannot even articulate, but they have so much inherent knowledge of physics and how the world works that, you know, it's just like hard to put it into the LLMs, hard to put it into the agents. And then I think that, you know, people not knowing all of this context is there leads to some of the confusion of why the AI agents aren't already good. Because I think there's a lot of people who are entitled of like, oh, surely the AI should be better, right? But they don't realize how much we humans, how much training we went through.
Yes, there is only as much context that we can fit into the LLM. Unfortunately, this is getting better and better with like 180K windows and more. But still, there is quite many information that we can funnel into this LLM.
All right, so my closing question would be, for people who want to use Windows Agent Arena today, what's the easiest way to do it? Is it through the GitHub?
Yes, I'd say so. And let me share my screen as I'm speaking. What I'm scrolling through right now, so basically that's the landing page of GitHub that we have right here. There are a couple of prerequisites that unfortunately you have to go through while you set up the whole environment. But the main idea is that you will have to bear with us when we prepare a so-called like golden image that will have all the tools that I mentioned like are needed for installing the benchmark. And after you do that, it's because like we've been trying to wrap things on a Docker image. Things are as easy as running a command. In this case, you can have different modalities for how you want like your AI agent to act. Here, just a table of different kind of techniques that we use to for tackling this benchmark. So you're free to like to go through that. And the main idea is that we said that there are like 150 tasks for running the benchmark end to end, and it's not feasible for one worker only to get that done. So definitely, if you are running through non-constrained resources, we recommend like running the benchmark on a cloud environment as we are seeing right here. And as I mentioned, we are like open for contributions. You can either like extend your the number of tasks that are available in the benchmark, or even bring your own AI agents. For bringing your own AI agents, it's as easy as like just extending our all default agents, as you can see from this doc.
Yep, we're also working on some other things internally as well. So, for instance, this includes things like expanding the number of tasks that we have. We have over 150 now. We're planning on building that out by quite a bit so that we're using it also as our internal testing grounds for our agent, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, other benchmarks can take up to hours, maybe up to a day or so, even more to run. Like the reason why we were able to iterate our agent so quickly is because we've made it parallelizable and scalable, which is something that can be done in like 20 to 40 minutes. And so if you want to improve your agent, see how it does, and tweak one little thing and then try it again, that makes it really, really easy to do. You can define your own new tasks, as Francesco is showing here as well. We try to make sure documentation is as complete as possible. And if you want to develop your own new tasks and test your own subset of tasks, or even want to share those tasks with other people, that's also possible too. We're also working on a few other things in terms of trying to get easier for you to kind of do a plug and play with your own agent if you so wished, along with a whole bunch of other things, like coming up with our own internal agent, or somehow seeing if we can make our own closed source agent accessible without giving the weights or anything else, but rather just through an API call or something too, in case you want to play that with that agent and run that agent on other stuff as well. But all these things are kind of potentially in the works and something we're looking at right now.
Awesome. So I'll link this in the description. I'll also include your guys' Twitter so people can follow you and follow the updates live. I appreciate you guys taking the time and showing us the behind the scenes and how Windows Agent Arena was built. Any last words?
Nope. Thank you for having us on, David. Really appreciate it. If anything else, please really let us know.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Right. That's it. Have a nice day.